Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Hello again, another edition, yes, of Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. And today with us from back east, the Ontario area, we have with us Jenny Kay Dupuis. She is an educator, an author, a writer, public speaker, all sorts of good stuff rolled into one package. Talking today about Heart Berry Bling. So Jenny Kay Dupuis, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Dennis.
And this is going to be fun because I want to ask you right off the top, Heart Berry Bling, why did you write this book?
Oh, for me, it was an important story, and I've wanted to tell this story for a very, very long time. It's a story that I drew on a number of my own experiences as a young child growing up. Under the Indian Act, which is a legislation that exists in Canada, it had an impact on a lot of First Nations people's lives, and particularly one component of it, First Nations women and children. And there was one section where many of us went without status and had it stripped away for so many years, and a group of women did get it back, as well as children. And I wanted that story brought to the forefront. It impacted me, it impacted my grandmother, and it's an important story. But I also wanted to bring in the idea of joy, even though there's so much pain and heartache that exists, within our histories. There's also joy, and it comes through our culture. And I wanted to talk about Indigenous joy with this little girl learning how to bead, talking about intergenerational learning and that relationship that people have with their elders and their grandparents and such.
And so, what actually was the portion of the act that affected your grandmother and yourself?
So it's called gender discrimination in the Indian Act. That's what it's called now, or people refer to it as. And what happened was, for a number of years, First Nations women who married somebody who was not status lost their status and had to leave their community and no longer had the connections that came with it. When it comes to having First Nation status. So it impacted thousands of First Nations women and thousands of their children as well too, who didn't receive status as a result of this. And a number of women stood up against this and spent much time advocating against this. And that piece of the act was revised. In 1985, there was one part of it was revised where people like my grandmother got it back, people like my father got it back. I didn't get it back until, some other women actually stood up as well and advocated for that change. And so I got it back in 2011, even though I was connected to my home community, my First Nation community. When it came to membership and such under the Indian Act, I didn't qualify until 2011. So you imagine what that does to somebody, even though you have that connection, right. With cousins and parents and such, and you're kind of wondering where you fit in all of this. So it has a great impact on identity. So it's important that people do talk about that, especially when we're talking about reclaiming culture and lost culture and such. We need to talk about stories like this. There are so many stories that even go beyond the residential school system that we talk about, that we need to talk about stories like this too.
And of course, it did not apply to men.
It didn't apply to men. So First Nations men who married somebody who was not First Nations, they remained having their First Nation status, and in fact, the women who were not First Nations received status. So even though it wasn't their bloodlines and such like that along those lines, they received it. So they received membership and everything that came with it. So, and that was not something that the community did. That was something that was under that law and that political system that made those changes.
And we have Heart Berry Bling, but your earlier publication was I Am Not a Number. What can you tell us about that one?
I Am Not a Number was a really important story. It was my first book that I wrote, and it was about my grandmother's experience going to a residential school in Northern Ontario. So when you take that concept and you break it down and you learn about the residential school system, we were very careful of what we wanted people to learn about. So the idea that she was taken, from her home community, taken from her family and relocated to live there, and talking about all of it that she had to go through. So it's learning about the experience. And then we also wanted to, with that particular book, I wanted to talk about resilience and resistance as well too. So when she returned home, my great-grandfather stood up against an Indian agent who returned to get the kids for the next year. And, he hid the kids and he made sure that they couldn't take them back to the school once he heard the story of what was going on at this school, even though the kids weren't supposed to share that information. So we think it was a really important story to share, and that there's a lot of lessons to learn when we talk about assimilation, when we talk about just the intent of what the school did and how it impacted families, communities, and even those children themselves and their parents. So there's a lot of lessons to learn through that book, and a lot of understandings as well.
And you're also an NBA creator. How did that come about?
Well, that was actually during the last season, the second last season actually of the NBA. I was selected I'm also an artist on the side, so I do woodland pop art, something I love to do, the bright colors, the imagery, and to talk about the interrelationships between sort of what I see in the world around me and, people, humans, nature and such, and spreading message around that. So the NBA had selected me to be an NBA creator for a year, so I picked some of their events, and they shared some of the images on social media using my art style, or I was able to use my art style, and I was also selected for a mural that's permanently installed in downtown Toronto, outside of the NBA courtside restaurant. And there's a bunch of merchandise, available inside the store as well too in the restaurant. So really excited about that opportunity, and I have a whole bunch of other new opportunities that are going to be announced shortly over this year, not with the NBA, but with other corporations and other avenues. So it's something that I do. I love, I do most of my work through digital media and painting and such. So it's a great, between writing and between art, it's a great way to express and my understanding of Indigenous knowledges and how I've grown up and such, and to share that with others.
Do you actually follow basketball?
Pardon me?
Do you actually follow basketball?
I do actually, yeah. So that's how actually I found out that they were looking for, at the time, they were looking for five NBA creators, which are artists from diverse backgrounds. And we picked the different events. So, everything from the playoffs and such, we had to show a representation of those in our style of art. So you had to have a pretty good knowledge of the background of the games and and all of that kind of stuff. So it's been interesting that you can bring that there's spaces that are opening up for Indigenous artists and also writers, and I get to experience both of those. I'm an educator as well too, so I have this really diverse life that I'm able to live and walk in a world where you're seeing acceptance, and you're seeing people open the doors and make space for your voice to exist and your craft to exist as well too, right? And I'm hoping that young people sort of see that, because I didn't have that as a young kid. Now I'm seeing so many more options, especially through digital spaces. Like, I do digital art, and I can work pretty much internationally with that work, with my writing as well too. I've had some phenomenal opportunities, especially with my current publisher, to be able to produce Heart Berry Bling, and the messaging that comes through that, and the joy that hopefully that story will bring. When we talk, it's not just about learning about gender discrimination in the Indian Act, but also learning about beadwork. That little girl learns about the struggles of thinking that she can't do something. It's so hard, but then together with her grandmother, they learn all the lessons about, learning something new, beadwork, and then developing these big, beautiful heartberry earrings, which really teach us about the heartberry teachings or the strawberry teachings, and teach us about joy and love and acceptance and such. So, people, I'm thankful to publishers and to many other that are opening the door and giving that space have our voices shared.
And Heart Berry Bling by Jenny Kay Dupuis is actually beautifully illustrated by Eva Campbell. How did that connection come about with you and Eva?
Yeah, I'm really thankful for that relationship that we had. The idea was we were looking for an illustrator, and there's a certain style of art that I was really looking for. So I don't illustrate my own books. And Eva's a Black illustrator who worked on some incredible books before. And when I saw her style, it really it was exactly what I was looking for in terms of the work that she does and the style that she does. So we connected, the publisher connected us, and we worked really, really closely, sort of learning from each other, me sharing sort of different cultural components and such, like what fry bread would look like, and, laying out sort of what, sending her images of what, certain beadwork would look like and all of that kind of stuff. And we had those conversations. They were very culturally inclusive conversations, and building sensitivity and understanding. It was such an important relationship that we developed over time, and she did an incredible job of capturing, bringing to life what I saw. So when I talked about the idea this drew on my own experiences, reality was I wanted to bring in, even though I didn't call the little girl by my name or my father's name or my grandmother's name, I wanted to bring in their likenesses. So we drew on photos of my grandmother and what she looked like, thinking about the hair and clothing and what her old apartment building looked like in the city of North Bay when she was, that's where she ended up living when she left her First Nation community, and also my father as well, because he took me, every weekend to visit my grandmother at the time. And I thought that was important to have him as a figure, this male figure, bringing this young girl to her grandmother's house, and to encourage that relationship to build and grow. But we really did look at, all the details, the couches and the style of the couch and all that kind of stuff. But I really wanted to bring this nostalgia to the book, and also bring a piece of me in wherever I could.
And right on the cover, we have a young girl looking in the mirror at her creation. Now, they're strawberry-shaped earrings that she's wearing. Is the strawberry significant in this story?
Yeah, the strawberry, it's called the Heart Berry Bling, the story itself, the title. But we often, we have these teachings that do follow, we call sort of Heart Berry teachings or strawberry teachings. And it really does, when everybody has their different teachings from the communities around it, but it really has to do with, how to find joy really in your life, and how to find love, and realize that, caring as well too. Caring is so much more than just a feeling, but there's so much more into that. So, this little girl really does learn about, truth and acceptance, and thinking about not only herself, but thinking about other people, and doing that. And the closing of the book is really a good summary of all the lessons this little girl learns. As she talks about how she beads, she beads with truth in her heart, hearing these stories from her grandmother, or beating with love in her heart, ready to receive these teachings from her granny, which helps her grow, and beating with respect and truth in her heart, for herself and others, and even recognizing that there's some that still people that still sit in silence and still struggle. This little girl develops sort of empathy for that as well too. And she ends with thinking about beating with peace and hope, hope for the future in her heart as well too. So I think it was the ending is really powerful, and there's so many messages and things that you can think about and talk about with young people, and with community about how to view yourself and other people, and really care for yourself and others, and the importance of that.
And the book itself, is there a certain age group that it's aimed at?
It's for 6 and up, but it's relatively, there's a lot of text in it. There's a lot of really good imagery, so that there's a lot could be done with that, with all levels of readers. And when you think of the topic too, there's, I think it's something that can transfer over into upper grades or upper, like I'm thinking of, the grade 9 arts. There's an Indigenous arts course that exists out there, and in some provinces. And, that definitely a great connection, because this little girl, it describes, how she's learning to bead, how she moves her hands, how she picks up so many beads, how she tacks them down. So even if someone was to take bits and pieces of the book for the description, and introduce it through story, there's places for that, right? And even as a way to, people always told me you can't really talk about also laws or legislations with young people, especially ages 6 and up, and the reality is you can. And we were able to do it through this book, through developing this conversation between Granny and this little girl, and having them slowly, this little girl ask questions and Granny answering, and going back and forth with a conversation. And that's what a lot of writers do when they try to introduce some very difficult, sort of more higher level concepts. So people are able to learn about this legislation that did exist, and what happened, and those feelings that Granny had, being isolated and removed from her community.
And when most little kids, they're like, before they get, the fun sort of taken away from them about learning, they're sponges. They'll absorb this stuff easy enough, don't you think?
Yeah, I think if the lessons are there, if the opportunity to break down and have the conversations with them, it's little kids have empathy. There's no doubt. Children do have empathy, and they do have understanding. And to have these conversations and understand, why Granny and this little girl wanted to wonder, like, she's sorting through these old photos, trying to find her beadwork pattern that she wants to make, before she encounters these Heart Berry earrings that she sees Granny, had made before, and wanted to replicate them. She runs into this photo of Granny and wonders, or she didn't even know who it was. She's kind of like, who's this? And then together they kind of say, oh, it's me back when I lived in the First Nation community. And the little girl's like, I didn't know you lived there. I always thought you lived in the city. And so the way that you introduce it, right? It is like, I wondered as a little kid, why does my Granny live here? And then in an apartment on the second floor in a city when everybody else, and a lot of other people in my family live in a First Nation community, or some are spread in different places too, like trying to understand that. And I think this is a good introduction, especially when we're talking about kids and we talk about identity building right now. A lot of them are trying to understand that, and of their place and such. So I think it's an opportunity for them to develop understanding, but also to develop this joy for their culture and joy for their community. And we don't talk enough about Indigenous joy. This is one of the first books to actually children's books to talk about, by the way, the gender discrimination in the Indian Act. But to also connect it with Indigenous joy, I think is also important, because we don't have enough literature around that either. So this kind of, it works you through this idea of, pain, sadness, and then brings you through to, the culture, the importance of cultural revival, or the cultural passing on of culture.
Well, I learned a lot.
Generations.
Oh, right. Well, like I say, I learned a lot just from reading the book, especially, but I didn't know that the exclusion, if you want to call it that, taking away the status, didn't apply to men. It was just to women. So that's an eye-opener for me right there.
Yeah, so that's why we call it also gender discrimination, right? In the Indian Act, that's found within that. It impacted the women, but it also impacted our children as well too, and the passing on of that First Nations status.
And the book is Heart Berry Bling. It's by Jenny Kay Dupuis. The illustrations are by Eva Campbell. And Jenny Kay Dupuis, also the author of I Am Not a Number. Before we go, Jenny Kay, what can you tell us? What do you have planned for the future? Anything you can tell us now?
I'm in the midst of some art contracts, so I'm looking forward to announce some other projects that I've been working on when it comes to that, and I'm slowly working on another book. So the writing of it, my focus right now is art, and kind of loving that right now.
And where can we get Heart Berry Bling? Is it available just about everywhere?
Yeah, it's available at all bookstores, independent, and beyond. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you very much for your time today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.